We are learning today that President Trump is planning to dismantle another Obama-era policy, this on affirmative action. This is according to a source familiar with the president's plan. The Obama-era policy laid out legal guidelines for any schools looking to use race as an admissions factor to promote diversity on campus. Justice Department spokesperson tells CNN, quote, "The executive branch cannot circumvent Congress or the courts by creating guidance that goes beyond the law. The Justice Department remains committed to protecting all Americans from all forms of illegal race-based discrimination." So we'll start there. I have with me defense attorney Sarah Azari and civil rights attorney Charles Coleman Jr. Great to see both of you guys.
Thank you.
To you first, since I haven't seen you the longest,
Yes.
I'm gonna start with you just on if a school wants to still use affirmative action in their admissions, they still can, correct?
Absolutely. The law has not changed, which is why this is very interesting as far as a political play from this administration. The law on affirmative action has not changed. The Supreme Court has not struck down affirmative action. The last case that went before the court, Justice Kennedy did, who's now retiring, obviously.
He left it open.
Did leave it open. He did leave it open, but it has not changed. And so we need to be very clear about that. What these guidelines from this prior administration did was simply explain to schools how they can most easily and most directly use affirmative action with respect to their admissions. What this current administration is attempting to do is basically to suggest that the Obama administration made it easier for affirmative action to be applied during admission, when in fact they did not. The law hasn't changed, and this is, in many respects, smoke and mirrors in a political play by the Trump administration.
On the political play, we were just talking to Joe Biskupic about this, whoever the president selects, right, as his nominee, and obviously has to go through the confirmation process for the Supreme Court. But how will all of that swirling affect this?
Well, look, let me just first say this, is that this administration has a great disdain for diversity. I mean, what is happening here right now is very consistent with what the Trump administration has been doing. You've got, the border, brown people coming in, they're MS-13, they're criminals. You've got the people in Charlottesville, the white supremacists who were fine people, as described by Donald Trump. And now you have a way by which they're trying to get rid of diversity on college campuses. So I think this is absolutely consistent. It's a trend that we've been seeing. And again, I agree with Charles in that the Supreme Court has twice upheld affirmative action. Mm-hmm. This is good law. So what they're doing is essentially, it's a political attack.
And I really want to piggyback on that. This administration has branded itself on two major things, and they're both different but related, especially in this instance. The first thing is, let's reverse any and everything that President Obama was able to accomplish during his 8 years in office. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is, let's appeal to our base by basically playing upon their fears on this attack of whiteness.
Right, exactly. It's like make America white again. I mean, that's what's happening here. And anything from the Trump era is bad, even if it's working.
And so conversations about diversity.
We don't have someone on the other end obviously argue against you guys, but I hear you, and it's your opinions on that. But I really want to get to Detroit because I want to make time for what's happening with these kids in Detroit. This is another huge education headline. A judge just missed this case. This was a case that was actually brought on by the students themselves, suing educational officials in Michigan, saying that they were denied access to a quality education. And they pointed to, the schools, the overcrowded classrooms, lack of textbooks, black mold, rodents, didn't have pins. There was even, I think, one 8th grade student who said he had to teach 7th and 8th grade math for a month because they couldn't find a teacher. So last year, the state moved for dismissal, arguing the 14th Amendment contains no reference to literacy. Mm-hmm. And then last week, the U.S. District Judge agreed with the state on that.
Horrible ruling that should be appealed, because the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment doesn't talk specifically about literacy, but it says states cannot deny equal access and opportunity to education. And what this judge is saying, literacy is very important. It's a 40-page ruling. He acknowledges the importance of literacy.
But then it's not up to the state to make sure kids are literate?
Exactly. He's saying so long as the schools run. And that's the question here. You've got a warehouse that's chaotic, that's filled with roaches, extreme temperatures, no books, no teachers. How is this a school? You can call it a school, but it's not.
What he did in this decision was he essentially made this a matter of functioning, as you described it, versus existing. And all he's saying is that basically you just need to turn it on. how it works or whether it works or how effectively it works is not up to the state,
And
which is really
So if
problematic.
the states, hang on, because I had to read this thing through to try to understand. If it's not up to the states to make sure kids are literate, if they're in public schools, then whose job is it?
It is up to the states, but he's saying they've done their job. They provided schools.
But they're clearly not doing their job.
They're
'cause the
clearly
kids-
not. They clearly don't have equal access to education because these are the schools in low-income Black neighborhoods.
And to that point, we cannot ignore the racial element to this story and to
Absolutely.
this decision. DPS, Detroit Public Schools, right now has a population of over 80% Black students. 20% of their overall student population is on IEP, individual education programs, which
need
means
more
that
help.
that requires them to have a little bit more assistance, whether they have behavioral issues or whether they have academic learning challenges. This population that is being marginalized in this direction, in this way, by this decision, this is not by accident. This is intentional. If this were the other way around, if DPS had 83% of white students and that were underperforming in the manner that has been described by these plaintiffs in this case, you better believe that Secretary of Education DeVos would be on a private plane to land in Detroit and figure out what was going on. So when you talk about this decision, you can't ignore the racial element and its impact on what's going on.
So just quickly, what happens to the kids? Is
Well,
this
I mean,
it?
these kids, they can appeal this ruling, and I think they should.
Absolutely.
To a higher court. This was U.S. district courts. They'd have to go to the Court of Appeals because I think it's a completely erroneous ruling. The judge is going through and explaining the importance of literacy in education, but then he's saying the states have done their job.
And looking down the line really quickly, Brooke, from a political perspective, this actually plays into what this administration wants to do in terms of pushing the notion of school choice. Because when public schools fail, the idea is, well, if your school isn't performing, then you as a parent should have the option to put it out. Okay. The reality is, though, that choice is a fallacy for so many of the people who are affected by this decision.
Charles Coleman Jr., thank you. Sarah Azari, thank you so
you.
much as
Thank
well on both of those stories.